Hi everyone. Just quickly thanks to Elna for inviting us to speak to you all today. Really excited to be back at the Hepworth Wakefield. My name's Robertson. My pronouns are they, them. An artist based in West Cornwall. Recently relocated from here in West Yorkshire, where last year I was an associate artist of Yorkshire Sculpture International, and I was paired with the Hepworth Wakefield and supported to make a new body of work which was titled Stone Butch. This was exhibited here in Gallery 3 and also as part of a group exhibition at Yorkshire Sculpture Park. I currently have a studio at Porthmeor Studios in St Ives. I would say that what I'm inspired most by the work of Hepworth is how she was attuned to what was around her, how she stated, I, the sculptor, am the landscape, and how she described having to feel her sculptures with all of her body. Being open to the elements and changes and continuously experimenting takes a great sensitivity and strength, which I admire. And what I'm going to do is talk about 3 places and how I've responded to the landscape or the environment which I live in. I'm just going to reference works or ways of work and or ideas that I feel resonate with Hepworth and how I've worked in these 3 different places. So I was going to talk about West Yorkshire and West Cornwall for obvious reasons, but I decided to also talk about Sunderland, because in the same way that driving around West Yorkshire was formative for Hepworth and how she viewed the landscape in relation to sculpture, I think Sunderland, as a place that I grew up, is a formative experience of mine and links with being influenced or shaped by the energy and presence of the sea and also the industrial landscape. I wanted to show this image of Sunderland, this aerial view of Sunderland, to give an idea of my first relationship with the environment that I lived in. It's a bit low quality, but it shows you basically, when I read about Hepworth and her experience of occupying the landscape and the freedom of moving around that landscape, I kind of think I didn't feel that relationship with the place that I lived. I lived in this I had the expanse of the sea and the freedom of that on the doorstep, but I lived in this very tightly packed post-industrial space where the housing was made for the shipbuilders and the miners and the people who worked on the river. And it was, I don't remember feeling inspired by my landscape as a young poor person in post-industrial Sunderland. I just remember very internal spaces, confinement, sort of tightly packed spaces where I couldn't see past it. So my imagination and ways of sort of thinking at an early age in terms of the sea or more expansive sort of scopes didn't happen until I had the freedom myself to go and explore, finding a way to even get down the river to the beach. It seems ridiculous that you couldn't find the beach as a young person, but had to, go and work out how to do that. So the material echoed all around me during my childhood was steel and the shipbuilding past. This is an image of female shipbuilders in Sunderland who worked during World War II in the Sunderland shipyards. I've been commissioned for my first public sculpture, which will be on the riverside in Sunderland. So I'm going to be working with steel on a large scale for the first time, and the first time that I've really worked with this material that I feel is from the place that I'm from, and really directly inspired by some of Hepworth's fluid forms in sheet metal and how she worked with shape and that. So really inspired by the fluid sheet metal sculptures. And just talk about another material that I think really stayed with me from my sort of formative experiences as being red brick. Literally the material I was surrounded by, and this porous sort of hand-sized material that I'm really interested in. This was a sculpture that I made, which is a sculptural suspended ceiling made out of red bricks. So I built this steel structure, and they're all suspended individually by a nylon cord, which I mic'd up using contact microphones and performed with, so I was getting the sound of the steel, the nylon cords and the brick. and really connected my body with those materials through sound performance. This was at a gallery called Auxiliary in Middlesbrough. I'm going to move forward, I don't know how many years, to West Yorkshire. Manchester was in the middle, but I'm not going to talk about that whole. I reminisced with that with Brassart last night, it's fine. So West Yorkshire is a place where I feel like I connected directly working in the natural landscape, and it was mainly spurred on by being an associate artist of YSI and being supported to create a new body of work and thinking about why I was selected as an artist who lived in Yorkshire and really connecting with the place that I lived. So I started out just walking from my studio in Hebden Bridge on the bottom of the valley up onto the tops onto the Bridestone Moor in Todmorden. And I was looking at the shape of the valley in which I lived, the shape of the land and how it's cut, carved and shaped by water, and also the light and dark contrast created by the valley and the experience of travelling up and over the tops and the scope that creates. So I was looking at the Bridestones and viewing them as these fluid bodies in stone, became interested in the idea of the queer body in the landscape and the act of connecting characteristics from stone and water with our sexualities and gender expressions. So looking at the qualities of stone related to being unyielding and strong and apparently related to masculinity, and the fluidity of water, bending and yielding, but essentially still having the strength to shape the landscape. So I'm interested in less binary understandings, seeing both stone and water being in a fluid, ongoing transition. I'm interested in Hepworth's sort of plural bodies, or how two figures can be combined into one sculpture, one single sculptural form. Looking at the term stone butch, which I feel was a term that was handed down to me from an era in the 90s, which was mainly popularised by a lesbian and trans activist and author, Les Feinberg, who described in their book the most stone butch of them all, a woman everyone said wore a raincoat in the shower. So this is, I'm really interested in the terrain of that raincoat layer and the barrier between our bodies and the environment that we occupy. And there's a certain violence embodied in that history. There's a dysmorphia involved in that description of a person's naked body being at odds with their sort of internal or true gender expression, how they identify with gender. For me, working with the void, working with the crack or the schism, these sculptures are titled Chasm, Schism. As you can see, I was applying plaster directly into the cracks in these natural rock formations. I see this as a transformative space, and I think in the sense that Hepworth's pierced forms can be seen to be spiritually charged, linking the material with the non-material. I see these physical voids as something that is charged or shifting. For me, there's something about queerness or gender non-conformity that scares a hetero and cis-dominated patriarchal power structure. And the joy or the spirit of queerness is restricted by this fear. So for me, this is another space, which is a space of freedom. And in the way that the Circle publication had a belief that abstract art was in opposition to totalitarianism, I have a belief that totalitarianism involves this single or binary understanding of sexuality and gender. So when I was doing this walk from the studio onto the tops, I was also looking at the water systems as they flowed through the valley and carrying out what I describe as these sculptural performances. So for me, these performances and improvisations are a way of connecting with my environment and almost absorbing it or becoming it. And it's, for me, a unifying experience. And it's this tension and energy that's held either in the photographs or the videos, which are usually short 1-minute videos, or also in the sculptural forms that are informed by this process. So this is some of the work exhibited upstairs in Gallery 3. There's 2 of the Chasm sculptures. I made 4 in total, and I made the photo collage and drawing that you can see behind there. And this is a video titled Piston, which was actually made in St Ives previously. Which takes us to West Cornwall, which is where I'm currently living and working. And I haven't followed Barbara Hepworth on purpose. I have followed the landscape and the light, I think, definitely in the way that she did. And I think some of the things, the way that she talks about how an idea can be formed really early on and then we're working on that same idea and over again, I think is how I see the way that I'm working as well. And I don't think I could work on what I would like to work on in Sunderland or even in West Yorkshire. It's almost like you're taking these things and then taking them into the light of West Yorkshire and shining that light on them, and it's just a much more open space to work, a much more freeing environment, and obviously has all of this inspiration of these wonderful natural rock formations. These photographs are taken at Cape Cornwall, which is a spot where the Atlantic currents divide. I'm currently thinking about my relationship with the sea, with a body of work called Between Two Bodies and Between Two Seas. I first made work in St Ives in 2018, but on very fleeting visits. This is a piece called Pissing, which is a performance for camera. I describe it as a bodily intervention. It's literally urinating in a crack in between two rocks, and it's a way of connecting the materials of the body with the materials of the natural landscape in perhaps the most direct way that I could, and as a way of using what I have or what's immediate in a way to say that we can always act, we can always do something or protest or use our bodies in that way. This is a photograph at the Porthmeor Studio. I'm in Studio 9 at the minute on a short let. I was really pleased to get the Chasm sculptures, which you can see near the window into the light of St Ives, and that the first time that they've been all together, because we're split into two pairs. So I've been looking at them more as a group of sculptures and looking at doing larger sets of them as collectives rather than pairings. And yeah. So this gives you a better view of, it's basically using plaster in the most direct way just to set that shape in the cracks of the stone, and then not until I got them back at the studio would I see the sort of forms that it's shaped, and I didn't work on them too much after that. It was kind of just reinforcing them to a point where they could hold their own weight, and I see them as these active forms. They're really delicate, but I kind of like that they're in this shifting sort of state. And it was only when I got these four together that I could start seeing the movement between them, or even the sort of flight, I think. So I like at the minute how they're sort of almost like ascending towards the window, they're trying to... So yeah, I'm working on some more of these in different locations, mainly a point that I can see from the window in the studio in St Ives. There's another image, which, yeah, just starting to look at them in different lights and starting to see the contrast and the shapes and the undersides and in between them and around sculptures, and thinking how I would install works like this in the future. I want to put plenty of images in of the studio because everyone's really loves these studios, so I thought I'd just put a good few studio images in there. It's been really incredible working in this space, and I'm working on, this is almost a deconstructed sculpture at the minute. It's got all its parts there, but it's some of the clothing from previous performances, sculptural performances that I showed you previously, and some of the performances and improvisations that I've been doing in the Cornish landscape. So materials, underwear, socks are used with different objects to create sculptures after I've made these improvisations, and I use sort of white underwear or sport socks as this it's got a relationship with masculinity, but also it's like this base layer of my identity, It's the first item of clothing that I felt resonated with my gender expression. So yeah, and it's also sort of using this white clothing in a way that you can see how it's affected by its environment. It's usually stained in some way by the performance. Yeah, so what Cornwall offers is a much more physical relationship with my environment, and swimming and sort of to embody or occupy these spaces. This is at Godrevy Point, and just the experience of being able to swim between these rocks and kind of really occupy the space and feel the materials of the water and stone, like in a really physical ways, really important to me at the minute, and I can't think of anywhere else where you could do that most of the year round. So just quickly, run out of time, some drawings that I've been making more recently in the studio, which really combine the figure, and they're automatic drawings, but I've been doing some more representational drawings while I've been there, but some of the sort of rock formations are coming through into combining with the figure in some of these drawings. And I've run out of time. I've got an open studio on the 28th of March if you actually want to see some work and you're in that area, and I'll put it on my website as well. That's the sea.